But unlike Venice, it never became a destination, a place of palaces. It was a village, it was a working village, a fishing village, and it still is to some extent. The fisheries are in the throes of a pretty serious crash, but it's still a fishing village. The people there still speak their own dialect, and they don't like you if you don't speak a dialect. They don't like anybody, really, but it's a real community on the coast. A community that's struggling with a fishery that's collapsing, and struggling with, we all hear about Venice flooding and sinking into the sea. So does Chioggia, but they don't have the notoriety and the artwork to give them the funding to save themselves. So for a long time, they were ignored as a little castaway community. I moved down here. I lived in a city hostel about 10 feet from these fishing boats, so I saw the fleet come every couple days and go out. And learned the fleet wasn't really fishing in Italy anymore. There were no more fish in the area. There were some fisheries in the bay, so this huge lagoon that Venice sits in, there were some fish there. For the most part, they were going to Croatia, and they were sort of finding political boundary loopholes to move in and take fish from Croatia and other parts of the Mediterranean. Building crashes up there, too. So you had this fishing culture poised to crash, and the community that is a fishing community poised to lose any tide into the sea. Beyond the fact that there were these local fisheries, these shell fisheries and things in the lagoon that were also not healthy, but they were potentially usable, potentially sustainable, except they were building these big floodgates to protect Venice that were going to cut the bay off from the ocean. And it was going to kill the bay. And it's happening right now as we're here. I mean, it was going on while I was there. They were building, you can see, this is downtown. You know, this is where, at one time they would bring all the fish in, now they bring them by these little cars over here. But they used to come in through here, the main canal. And there's little fish. So these are local fish. They're little.
How little?
They're big. That's it's a foot cutting board, 1 foot wide.
1 foot.
Yeah, but they're all little fish. Made a stew out of this, I think. And my mom came to visit here, and she stayed here for a little while with me and the Italians I was living with. So got to know this place pretty well. It's my home base for most of my time in Italy, on the coast here. You can see it's a wild place. I mean, traditional boats, still very a traditional coastal community. People out climbing next to sewage outflows, the kind of thing that is not sustainable for a community to stay tied to the ocean. And there's very little government push right now to clean these things up. And the people have a strong belief that it's always been this way, and it'll always be this way, and it'll always work. But I didn't have the spaghetti with clams that day. What they're doing is they're building these huge projects everywhere in the world, but here especially, because Italy has some money. They have these art treasures. The international community is like, we got to protect Venice. We got to throw money at this ocean and stop it and build up these big walls. This is like 1 kilometer long. This is like half a mile. This jetty out into the ocean that marks the bottom of the bay of the lagoon, where they're trying to stop these breakwaters. And so they're building these things, these old-fashioned, big, let's block the water type approaches. And they're building. They're filling in an area to drain it to put in these electronic gates downtown there. What they'll do is they'll be able to, as this wall right now is blocking the water, there's going to be a gate now that can come up and block the water in place of that dirt, so they can turn on these protection systems. And this is in Chioggia, the city I lived in. These are very small. They're building humongous ones at the entrance to the Venetian lagoon that can come up when there's a storm surge and protect Venice from being flooded, with the caveat that it'll happen twice a year. Venice floods like 6 times a year. Last year it was 8 times. I mean, it's growing. And the fear is, and rightly so for fishermen, especially in the lagoon, that these things will go up one day and they won't come down for a long time. And you'll have all the waste of people living in this area staying in the lagoon and killing the fisheries that are in this area. But it's this really heavy-handed money solution, which is an approach that the world's taking to deal with the world wanting to move around and change. You can see here some of the just another view of town. I mean, this was, when I was there for about a month, this was kind of the weather, just fog. It was foggy and wet. I mean, everyone in town in the winter wears boots all the time because the city floods, a little bit every day. Not so big. It's, most of the buildings have blockades to keep water out, but sometimes they come in and then you have to really clean everything up because this water, like I said, is not the cleanest water. And it's just, I knew restaurant owners that were just, they couldn't do it anymore. They couldn't deal with 6 floods of winter when they had to tear out their entire first floor. They said it was not happening. It wasn't going to work. They couldn't stay there. And what that means for the town is no one really knows yet. I mean, in Venice, it meant that people aren't there anymore. That most of the shops are like vacation-type homes or tourist places that don't build on the first floor, that don't use that space. That's very useful. And like I said, I was home-based there. I said home-based because I left a lot. The trains in Italy are amazing. Public transportation is incredible. You can get anywhere. Italy's really cool. And this is up north here towards Germany, the top of the mountains, early winter. And I would go there partially to get away from the coast because I felt like I needed this balance, this high and low balance. And also because of the community I lived in. I picked the slide being very white because I lived in a very white community, a very, very strongly Italian, to the point of like our village, like, there's 8 last names in this town for a reason, young man, type thing. And that really got to me. I mean, northern Italy, like a lot of Europe right now, is becoming very, they're turning in. Very, 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 I mean, it's a scary thing, actually, the way Europe is turning in to protect their own people, as they refer to this. And I would spend time with a lot of immigrants because I didn't really speak Italian that well. I wasn't necessarily legal after a while anymore in Italy. So I would hang out with the immigrants in the street who spoke pretty good English because a lot of them were mostly from Africa, who'd come up and we'd chat in the streets. But I watched them get kicked around, spit on, all kinds of stuff. And it got to me. So I go to mountains to go get inspired and not go crazy and get deported, which was sort of fierce sometimes in the coast. So again, go up to the mountains for inspiration because I couldn't get away from it. I mean, George, who a lot of us know, used to tell me not to forget people. He used to always say, because I was into a lot of outdoor things. And George would say, that's really good stuff, but don't forget about people. And I would go to the mountains to forget about people, purposefully. And Italy, just to me, was great. We went on all these trips. I went on all these trips around and just saw, the culture that had existed in this place for so long and had used the resources of the country for a long time, and still existed, still worked. And that interested me, the fact that cultures could have persisted for so long here. I think it's just ancient Crusade era ruins, caves somewhere in southern Italy. In this area, and an incredible juxtaposition between these cultures that are ancient and the modern world, like in Venice, where you have these buildings of an empire, a huge empire, that are now being protected by these big, bright yellow emergency floodgates. And that just, to me, was really interesting. Let's see, parts of southern Italy that were just beautiful. Again, this is the age of the country. Whole rock walls just weathering away. And agriculture was a big focus. I farmed a bunch on the trip and learned a lot about food. So I was always interested in places about how people ate and where their food came from, back to the clique in northern Canada, smeared on my white bread. There we go. This is, again, southern Italy. And architecture forms. I mean, these are the same architecture forms that you can see. I saw little islands off the coast of the Mediterranean. Saw some pictures of Turkey, of northern Scotland. I mean, it's incredible the way humanity has sort of spread itself out with the same designs. You see a lot of boats, too. Like some of those boats in Italy that look the same as boats that I saw in Cambodia or in Canada. Again, just back to the coast. I did make it back to the coast again. This is in northern Italy, near Slovenia, where you have fishing villages all tucked in here. They're fishing villages only in history. I mean, they're now little resorts for settlers because there's no fish in the ocean here. None. This is the places where the boats from the village I was living in would have fished at one time, and they don't anymore because there's no fish. They're gone. And it's a beautiful place, though. I mean, you can see and the water is really clear, really clean, but barren. Again, this is the same kind of architecture in Sardinia. So Italy had people. I was kind of shocked by cities. I was like, oh my God, I was in Canada, this remoteness was a lot, and then Italy had people, and I felt like I was getting overwhelmed by cities, so I just had to go to Bangladesh, which was a very strange direction to take, because in Bangladesh there are 150 million people. It's as big as Iowa. It's actually smaller than Iowa. So this is half the population of the United States squeezed into a very flat place, smaller than Iowa, with no public sewage, no food, and no clean water. So I get here. These buildings, it's just people with buckets and bamboo ladders. That's how you build skyrises in Bangladesh. So I get the DACA. What are they thinking? This is crazy. I mean, everything's on fire. There's trash everywhere. I just stepped in a sewer again. I don't understand anything.